Hi, I'm David Alzamendi, independent data architect and consultant. And today we're going to be looking at planning for fabric capacity and how to optimize the ongoing price of that fabric capacity. Okay, so let's get started. So, a couple of things that we are going to look at today. The first one definitely is about, what are some tips and hints that we can use to optimize that capacity. And the second one is, a little bit of cost optimization for the platform, which is always important for keeping that ongoing cost down. Uh, I guess many of you've seen, how challenging could be optimizing that fabric capacity. So I think, I'll share a few things that I have learned during the past 18 months, and that definitely helped me, keep that cost down when using Microsoft Fabric and the different SKUs, and it could be confusing in a nutshell what all that means. But all right, so we have to start a little bit from the basics somehow. So when you look at the different fabric capacities, you have to think of the different SKUs. And remember, each SKU within Microsoft Fabric Capacity will give you a different number of fabric capacity units, which is essentially tokens for using fabric compute power. Okay, that's the first thing that is really important. The price in Microsoft Fabric is one thing will be all the compute power, and separately you have things related to storage, networking, and even things that you haven't accounted for. Okay, so what you get in the Microsoft Fabric capacity is mainly compute power that you're going to use across your workloads. Uh, so, and there is a lot of considerations around how many capacity units you are able to use within a 10-minute period, 1 hour, and 24-hour period. But what you have to remember in a nutshell, okay? So within each tier, each second, you'll get a different number of capacity units. F2 essentially means that each second you get 2 capacity units. F4 means that you get 4 capacity units, and that grows exponentially as the price grows exponentially as well. One thing that it is important, so there are some policies and conditions in regards to the usage. So let's go to the worst scenario. If you use all the capacity units that you were allocated within a period of 24 hours, and you can borrow capacity units from the future, put it that way, the platform might stop working. So there are some really strict considerations that you have to account for in a production environment, especially. And the other consideration as well is that um, this wouldn't add up. I think this will be 2 million, right? We're missing something here. Okay, doesn't matter. But the other consideration is that if you don't use capacity units within a period of an hour, you will lose them. So it's not that you can accumulate your capacity units for 1 week and then use them all. So that's something as well that you have to understand. If you don't use the capacity units, you will essentially lose them. So let's go and have a quick look actually at the pricing of Microsoft Fabric. I think that's the best place to start from. So let's open Fabric pricing, and we'll navigate this a little bit so you're a little bit more comfortable on understanding the pricing. So the first thing, right? So when you look at the pricing, so you have 2 options, but if I scroll down, you can see that the one lake storage, that'll be built separately, okay? So whatever is storage planning, so you can do that separately. So storage is going to be built separately than the fabric capacity units. Okay, so we'll come back to this section as part of the cost optimization tips and hints. But essentially, you can see here, right? So each tier will give you a number of capacity units for each second, and you have two main models: pay-as-you-go model and the reservation model. But before we do any of this, okay, I'm going to show you two different tools that are available out there for planning your fabric capacity. I will start with the last one, which is about capacity planning, and this has been released only a few weeks back. This, you can see it like a, yeah, it is in preview, you know. That means that, you know, Microsoft doesn't you know, doesn't offer some sort of you know, if you run into problems by using this calculator, Microsoft will not take any responsibilities, put it that way, right? And also it means that it is not, you know, like a production ready. So this is like a nice way to start estimating planning, but in my experience, this is far from being what you need at the enterprise environment. Okay, this would be good as a starting point if you want to have a scientific way of explaining how you came up with the estimated cost, or even in the case, you know, that you can say, okay, you know, we use Microsoft capacity estimator. Okay, so if you want to use those two excuses, you know, I have a scientific way of explaining how we came up with this cost, or, you know, we used the official Microsoft capacity estimator to come up with this cost, but real world, okay, you know, I found, at least in my case, like this being far from what is going to be in a real production scenario. So this is free. You can go and use it. Essentially, remember, so even before we come here, okay, there are essentially a few key items when estimating capacity in Microsoft Fabric, which is how many assets you're going to be working with. And with asset, I mean, you know, number of tables, number of files, from which source system are those tables going to come from? You know, is it Oracle, SQL Server? Is it file? Is a JSON file? Are we going to have to apply transformations to denormalize that information, to flatten that information? So all those considerations, number of items, put it that way. The second one will be essentially how big those items are. And when you're doing capacity planning, forget about the initial load, you know, because that's going to be a one-time off. But how much data are you going to be loading on a daily basis? That'll be the key one. Okay, that one is going to drive your ongoing cost in Microsoft Fabric. And the last one essentially is how frequent. How frequent are you going to load that information? You know, are we going to load the 100 tables once a day? Are we going to load them every 4 hours or every 5 hours? Essentially, those are the three main parameters: how many, how much, and how frequent. That is going to drive your ongoing cost. You might be wondering in some scenarios as well, how many users are going to be using the reports. If your users are in the thousands of users, I would agree that that'll be an important parameter as well. But for most 90% of the organizations, if not even more, the ongoing cost is going to be driven by those background operations, which is, you know, moving data, transforming data, and how frequent we do that. So by knowing that, so when you come here, you can essentially see the total size of the data when compressed. This means the data once it is in one lake. Okay, remember, this is not in the source system. So once the information hits one lake and it's being stored in those Delta Parquet files, so the information is going to be compressed up to 100 times, depending on the type of data. But this is how much the data is going to be once it is in one lake. And you can see that in here. You also have to consider everything in one lake, right? So you might have multiple environments and so on. So put everything here, you know, say, okay, the default example is like, we have 100 gigabytes. We're going to leave it in there. The second parameter is essentially how many times are you going to load the information. Again, in a production environment, in a traditional data analytics workloads, unless you are doing real-time analytics, uh, it'll, it'll be once a day, and you might have a few tables that refreshed on a hourly basis. We don't have that flexibility here, so you don't have that level of detail. So this is like, we start high level, we're trying to come up with initial cost estimate, and you say, okay, I want to load this on a daily basis. Keep it really simple. And the last one parameter that we mentioned is how many items. I will load in 10 tables, 100 tables, 500 tables across all the different source systems, and here you can specify that. Now, next is essentially how you're going to use your fabric. Are you going to have any data science workloads? Are you going to use Data Factory, the data warehouse, Spark jobs, and so on? And depending on the architecture that you're trying to enable in Microsoft Fabric, you will enable some experiences or not. Now, in the future, let's say for any organization that goes through the data maturity, from process of we are like a capability maturity model with an assessment of 1, and then we want to get to 5. I would say all of you in the future, you like to do some data science workloads. Now the question is, are you going to do that in the upcoming year, 2 years? If the answer is yes, okay, you might want to estimate the cost now. If the answer is no, because you have to go through the process of first organizing all the information in a data warehouse, you might want to leave some of these disabled, so you don't have to enable all of them. And remember, every time that you enable something here, you'll have input parameters at the bottom, and you won't have many, which is a good thing and a bad thing. So not having a lot of parameters to work with, it will mean that the capacity planning won't be as detailed or as close as a production environment, but you will have a number that you can start with. Okay, let's start this. So in my case, I like them, I will use Data Factory, Data Warehouse, might have some Spark jobs. I will definitely have Power BI. From a reporting point of view, if you're doing Power BI embedded in an application, you will enable that one. I won't have real-time analytics, and I won't have SQL databases in Fabric. To understand what all of this means, okay, it might take you some time, but it is you can see that we have reference to the documentation in here, which is great. Even in the case of Activator, so Activator you will use in the case of subscriptions, alerts. I found that some of them, they're when running production workloads, they are not optimized yet for consuming the let's say the less number of capacity units possible. But let's keep it simple, okay? Those there NoSQL databases, hours of daily data flow Gen 2. So nowadays I don't recommend actually running data flow Gen 2. I think it's a waste of resources. If you want to apply transformations, I highly recommend either going with the store procs in the data warehouse or using the notebooks in the Apache Spark area. So, but okay, let's say in this scenario, we're going to use data flow Gen 2 because we don't really have many options in here. 2 hours a day for applying transformations. Okay, let's see, use migrate to Fabric experience. This is in case you want to migrate from a dedicated SQL pool. We're not doing that at all. So we move back. The funny thing, you can see this is so basic, right? So I know this is new, okay, but hey, it's been almost 2 years of the product being available in public preview or general available, and you can see this calculator doesn't give us a lot of options. So daily Power BI report viewers, let's say we're going to have 30 users looking at the report, and we're going to have five users creating reports. And then if you hit calculate, let's see if we're missing something, or it comes back with some information. And that's all. Hit calculate, and it comes back, with an estimated Microsoft Fabric capacity. This is the number of Power BI Pro licenses that we're going to need in addition of the Fabric capacity. And this is the number that you're going to put in the Fabric calculator in here. So that means that when you go to we'll go back to the pricing. Let me see if we can open it from here. It'll be nice to open this. Stay from here. It'll be nice, right, to have many more things in here. But this is an easy way to start with the planning. You might be arguing this is definitely really far from what you're looking for in a real scenario, but this gives you a high level number to start with. So taking into account this, so then you can go back to our Fabric pricing webpage. And we're going to open essentially the Azure calculator. So let me bring the Azure calculator to this screen, and I'll show you how everything comes together. Okay, so let's put this side by side. So you have that one, and we have this one here. Okay, so the recommendation was to get an F4. So you can go here in the calculator. We add this, and this will be essentially an F4. And then we have to get as well some storage. Hopefully we'll have a storage around here. So it's telling us to put 180 gigabytes of storage. And of course you always want some support, and we need to add the Power BI Pro licenses. That I don't know if we're going to have them in here because you have them as part of the Office 365 area. But here you can see, okay, so if I scroll down, it gives us a monthly estimated cost. And remember the two different pricing models, so you can go reserved, and you see the pricing in there, and the pay as you go. And if you want to estimate the Power BI Pro licenses, remember that you go to the Office 365. It's essentially $15 per user per license per month. Okay, what do you think? Let me know what you think about this, calculate estimator here. I think it's really maybe too basic in my likes. The good thing, I guess, let's say that it's easy to use, right? So anybody should be able to come here, put some parameters, and come with the estimated cost that you can start working with. This even before you've done any proof of concept, and have gone through the exercise of doing performance testing and looking at the Fabric capacity metrics up. This is one way. The second way, before they put this up there, they actually had an Excel workbook going around. Okay, this you might be able to find in the internet, but essentially this was the first version before they made that available in the website. And this one has more parameters, more input parameters that you can factor in for capacity planning. The idea is quite similar. You can see here, so we have similar parameters. How many working days is our solution going to be loading the information? Is it Monday to Friday? We're going to execute the data movement and make the reports available. It might be your case. Most of you, maybe if you work in an organization that they have to have those reports available, or those data native workloads 7 days a week, you might say 7. Again, depending on your business need, you'll be able to modify this. The total size of your data once it is compressed in Fabric, we're going to try to use the same parameters. Let's see what happens. Let me just have a quick look in here. So we said basically 100 tables, 100 gigabytes. Okay. Daily data word, how many times a day we're going to load the data. So we say one, how many tables, 100. What percentage is hot data? This mainly, okay, out of this 100 gigabytes, how much of that data is going to be queried essentially on a kind of a daily basis. I think let's say 20%, and this how much data are we going to be loading incrementally on a daily basis, right? So remember, one thing is the initial load, but then it comes down, okay, maybe on a daily basis, we're going to be loading only a couple of gigabytes of data. I found during the past 15 years that 500 megabytes to 2 or 3 gigabytes, that's the daily increment on a daily basis. And remember, this is, if I'm not wrong, this will be even compressed. So something to factor in. If you already have a data warehouse environment, you can easily gather this information. If you don't have a data warehouse environment right now, you can just make your best guess based on the information that you're going to be importing. Some of the systems where you're importing the information from, they might also have actually a way of measuring how much the data is growing on a daily basis. But remember, you'll never bring all the tables from the source systems. You'll bring only the tables that you're going to be working with initially. I don't recommend bringing all the tables, because why would you, right? So the more tables you move, the more risk for the organization, the more you have to manage, the more you have to govern, the more policies you have to have. So many things that you have to factor in. I'm not saying don't bring them all, but if you bring all the tables to your data analytics environment, you have to have a reason for doing that, other than, oh, let's bring everything and let's see what happens after. And you can see as we scroll down, so we have similar parameters. Are we going to use are we going to transform the information into a gold layer using Spark? Do we need the data warehouse endpoint? I would say yes. Most of us were going to be using the SQL endpoint for different reasons, for connecting Power BI, for building our semantic models using Direct Lake, and so on. In Power BI, how many users are going to be creating reports? Let's say we stick to the same. I think it was 35. I would say, how many reports creators we mentioned in here? Let me scroll down. We say 30. No, only actually 5. So 30 people creating the reports and 5 looking at it. So let me bring this back. We lost it. One more time. There it is. Okay. So say 5 creators, and do have the E5 licenses. So because it comes with the Power BI Pro license, we're going to say no. And we need another 30 users querying the reports, and number of reports. Okay, no, this means we don't have any Power BI Pro licenses, and we need another 30 users in here. We're not using Power BI embedded. Here, how many concurrent queries and activities we need in the SQL endpoint. We're not using this one. And this, actually, I don't remember what this is. We'll have to look at the fine print and the total number of concurrent queries on a daily basis. Let's say we're refreshing the semantic models, we might leave that enabled. This seems to be a lot. Let's say that we're going to use this for refreshing our semantic model, maybe once a day if we're using import mode. If you're using Direct Lake, those Direct Lake queries might go through this SQL endpoint. So let's go this to 4 hours. Real-time analytics, I'm not going to include it. And then essentially we'll go and hit calculate. And it will come back here with the information, essentially the capacity, the tiers, the SKUs that we need for each one of the workloads, and there should be a recommendation here overall at the bottom, telling us that we need F16. Again, if I go to the input parameters, I think the difference in here will be this one, so that we're doing the transformations with the Spark. So if I put no in here and we hit calculate again, okay, I would expect this to somehow find out what's bringing that up quite a bit. Let's try this. Okay. Something here, is telling us, and I think it's going to be decrease that one. 5, I think might be that one, and we'll enable this one again. Calculate, trying to find out. There it is. So you get to play a little bit and understand what's driving the different recommendations. In this case, you saw that the AHO Lakehouse SQL is being driven by the parameters that you have in here with this, the number of concurrent queries and how frequent they run. So if I decrease this, we should expect that number going further down. Now, the good thing about this one, right? You have more options. So this is not all. You have different models that you can work. So you can see the peak lean models. So this is basically you want to estimate for the peak number of resources that you're going to use, or you want to stick to an average. So if I go to the average page in here, you will see that we have a lot of options. And here, this is going to be mind-blowing, because here on the right side, you can highlight actually out of those 100 tables that you're working with, what type of source systems you have for those tables, right? So maybe instead of doing so 100% of the items that we put are SQL Server, you might say, 15% are SQL Server, so we'll have 20% of files, we'll have 30% coming off tables, and the rest will be, let me do the math. So we'll have 45, 65, so another 20 coming from Amazon S3 bucket, 5 coming from here, and then you have 10% coming from Teradata. And that makes up 100% of your tables, right? If I'm not wrong, yes. And why? Because when you're importing tables from your source systems, the number of capacity units that you're going to use is not going to be the same across source systems. And this gives you the flexibility, to modify a little bit that further, which is the ingestion rate. So let's go again. So imagine that you're bringing information from an Oracle database, and this Oracle database is in a different network, maybe even in a different region from where your Fabric capacity is. So, and then you have a SQL Server that is in the same region as your Fabric capacity within the same network. So when you are importing the data, the duration of the process that takes to bring the data to one lake is not going to be the same. And you can see that this is starting to open a lot of new opportunities from planning point of view. And definitely this workbook, it will take you some more time to understand, what all these parameters mean, but it gives you one more level of detail in comparison to what you saw in the first estimator tool. Now, remember the estimator tool that we're talking about, this is going to get better. We can expect this to get better and better. We don't know how fast they're going to deliver new parameters in here, but in the time being, I like to see that level of customization. I'll show you a couple of more things in here before we move on. Okay, ingestion rate, remember, so your data sources are not going to be in the same place. There'll be different networks, different regions with different bandwidth limitations, needs, and so on. And then you also have the compression factor, right? You can say, okay, look, so if the file is coming from SFTP, and you're talking about some sort of a gzip files, and those files, they've been encrypted. So you won't be able to compress those files within one lake because there is no mechanism to compress the encrypted file. But if the information is coming from a database, you know that you'll be able to compress a lot of those tables once that you convert them to Delta Lake files. So you have the compression rate, compression factor, and on the left side, if I scroll down, so you can see here what the input parameters are going to be when we calculate the ongoing cost. And let me see if I can hide this to make this a little bigger. There it is. This is driven actually by different input parameters here at the bottom. So you have, how the information is going to be stored in one lake. How many is in bronze, silver, gold, hot. Some of the data integration information. How much data are you going to copy from those tables, and I think we can change this. So you can see there are parameters that you're able to change. Some of them, the ones in green from memory, I think it's recommended not to change them because those are calculations clearly. And from a Spark point of view, you can come here, and if I scroll down, let me see if I find it. Yeah, here, this is the important one. You can say how big those nodes are going to be as well. I think this is an important parameter, right? Because you might have a large Spark cluster that you want to share across different sessions for doing all your data movement and transformations. But you might decide, you know what, I have a small one. Now, this calculator doesn't take into account things like sharing the sessions for a Spark. I have to mention that. So this was even built. We have those capabilities in Microsoft Fabric. But that I wanted to show you, that you have a lot of different items in here that you can modify, and the outcome is going to be a different output in the calculator, essentially in the recommendation that you see here as such. So this is the second tool that you have out there available for you to come up with estimated, doing the planning of your Fabric capacity, even without, getting to a proof of concept. Now, real world scenario, okay? How do you want to approach this? So the way that we approach this essentially when we run projects is the first one. Yeah, you can use this one, to get this started, get the conversation started. Any of these two tools, when you're trying to come up with a number as to, if we use Fabric, it's going to cost us this much, and get that ballpark figure. But the next step is always running a proof of concept. You want to run a proof of concept without even committing. Maybe it could be like a 2 to 6 weeks proof of concept. I wouldn't go further than that. To try to come up to validate, first of all, as part of that proof of concept, you want to do many things, okay? You want to know if it's the right platform for your organization, either do you have the right skills, is the validate the architecture, you want to have just a 2-tier data warehouse, a lake house, you want to have a medallion architecture, you want to validate the architecture. And one of the other things that you want to do is, try to validate the ballpark figure as part of that proof of concept, right? So when you're validating the cost, so remember the 3 important parameters: how many, how much, and how frequent. So those are the main ones. Remember that 90% of the resources that you're going to use from your Fabric capacity, they come out actually from those background operations. This means moving data and transforming data. Okay, and of course, if you have data science workloads, that definitely you have to factor that in. And if you want to do real-time analytics or use the Fabric databases, those will open different scenarios as well. This is Excel spreadsheet here, to summarize, give you a few more parameters. It's a little bit old. You can see we don't have Fabric databases in here, and I I wouldn't expect this Excel workbook to change so much, because the idea is to make all the experience available in this web uh, item here. Okay, planning. So if next step, if you were running a proof of concept, so there is a tool that you have to go and install by default, which is the Fabric Capacity Metrics app. So let me navigate to my Power BI portal, and I'll try seeing if I open a couple of them, and one that is meaningful. So as soon as you are running the proof of concept or you're testing Microsoft Fabric Capacity, the first thing that you want to do is, one of the first things, of course, go and provision the Microsoft Fabric Capacity Metrics. This is going to help you monitor the resources for up to 14 days. And if you've seen my video the last week or 2 weeks ago about deploying the Fabric Unified Management, solution, so that allows you to go and store information for more than 14 days. But out of the box, make sure that you go get apps and get the Microsoft Fabric Capacity Metrics app. Get this. You can run this in a Power BI Pro license. It doesn't have to be a workspace backed by Fabric Capacity, but this is going to help you. Let's see if we get some useful information, or if no, I'll navigate to another one. I will open another one in the meantime. But then when you deploy this, you should be able to just easily configure this refresh. Let's see if this refresh is wrong. And also it says here that I can update this app. Okay, let's see if we can actually update it. And if not, I'll try find one with other information. Should be an option here. Usually like a small banner here that tells you to update the app. Or if not, even better, I'll show you actually that you can come here, and we're going to delete it, and we're going to install it again. And now we'll go to apps, and we're going to install it again, so you also see the process. And while that's installing, that's reservations. I think this is the one that we want. I'll show you how to configure this in the meantime. Okay, get it now. So once this process finishes, I'm the admin, unless I'm here with a different user. No, I'm the admin. Nothing like real life demos, right? Okay. Once that you install the app and configure it, it's going to ask for the capacity ID, and you can get that from the admin settings of the capacities. But once that you put that and you put the time zone that you want to report the information of, so basically you will get something like this. And this report, this is really good. Okay, I don't have a lot of items in here, but essentially this shows you the number of capacity units used by day and item. You'll see multiple items if there are any here, and you get the grid view in here as well. And on the right side here, you get actually a breakdown of the usage of the capacity units by type of operation. Remember, background and interactive. So the background operations are the ones that are essentially, for most organizations, they will use 90% of your resources, and the interactive operations. And these ones, before I keep going, okay, these are basically anything about data movement, data transformations, across any tiers, importing the data, creating dimensions, fact tables, moving them between bronze, silver, and gold layers. And the interactive operations are essentially anything related to the user, querying reports. You can think about this that way. And they will make up essentially the other 10% for most organizations. I say most organizations because most of you you will use most of the resources, transforming the data and moving the data within Fabric and to Fabric. Yeah, of course, if you have a scenario where you have thousands of users querying the reports using Power BI embedded, and you don't do a lot of transformations or you don't import a lot of data, these percentages are going to change. What else? So why am I showing you this? Because remember, so you might, as part of the capacity planning, the first step, you might use one of those calculators that I showed before. But the second step is that you want to go and test it by yourself. You want to make sure that you validate that ballpark figure. And you're going to do performance testing. And here's the thing, right? So what do you want to do? So we know that the number of items that we're going to import is going to drive. It's one of the parameters that is going to drive the consumption of capacity units. And the second one is the type of source systems and how frequent we're going to bring them. So when you're preparing your performance testing, I highly recommend doing a few things in here. So the first one is breaking down your workloads by workspaces. So you will have a workspace for your data stores. You will have a workspace data stores, and you will have a workspace for reports, and you will have a workspace for data movement or orchestration. Okay. Why do you want to? First of all, this is best practices because then you can allocate different Fabric capacities to different workspaces. But by isolating different items in different workspaces, this is going to make your life easier when filtering all this information by workspace. Right. This is the first level, and the second level basically is your item names. This becomes really important. So within your data movements, remember, here we're not doing so much, maybe as part of the proof of concept, we want to test the architecture, but at the same time, we want to validate the number of resources that we're going to use. So on one hand, you want to build go and build a small meta-driven approach that brings all the assets and so on. But for performance testing, you might decide actually so within this space, I'll give you an example, right? You might decide actually to go and have a pipeline for your Oracle resources. And you might decide to have a pipeline in here for your files. And while this might not be the final production environment, this is going to allow you to easily actually see these items showing up in your Fabric Capacity Metrics hub, right? So you will see the pipeline Oracle, and you will see how many capacity units you are using. And the same is going to be for the files. And within the pipelines as well, you might want to break down the pipeline for Oracle, right? On one essentially that has the large tables and one that has the small tables. And you're starting to see now that this is getting, so we're thinking of basically trying to make it really easy for us. So when we get to the Fabric Capacity Metrics app, that we have an easy way of identifying how many capacity units we're going to use. This is the way that I do it. when doing performance testing nowadays. And I had to go through multiple iterations to get to the point, was easy for me. And of course, finally, you will go and schedule these pipelines to run. Maybe do you want to run this daily basis? Uh, do you want to run this more than one time a day? And if you run it more than one time a day, so this report doesn't help you with that, because this is summarizing by daily basis. But you can go and query actually the backend of this semantic model and understand how many capacity units you used for a specific operation within a specific time period as such. But definitely next time, you will have this running on a daily basis for 1 week and see what happens. What else? I know this screen is getting really busy, but let's go one more level. So when let's stick with the example of the pipeline for Oracle tables. Even what I was going to say in this example. So when you are bringing the data, so instead of bringing 100% of the data every day, which won't be a fair test for doing performance testing, because on a daily basis you'll be bringing only a small percentage by using incremental loads. So you might want to fine tune your queries that go and fetch the data from Oracle to only maybe get 5% of the information every day. And you will have this running, ideally you want to schedule this as soon as possible, and then you will build up to 14 days of data and information, because this is how you can only see 14 days of data in the Fabric Capacity Metrics apps, and you will start playing with different scenarios. So this is bringing the data in, but then you will say, okay, what happens if we do the transformation with the store procedures in a warehouse? What happens if we do the transformations with notebooks? So you're going to start doing different testing for different scenarios. Now, in my 18 months of experience of working with Microsoft Fabric, this is what I found. Look, I show a few things. So first one, data flows you to avoid, because they use a lot of resources. For time, they will get better. When they get better, I will say the same. I will say use them, but right now avoid them because they use a lot of resources. Warehouse store procs, they are great actually. I think they are highly overlooked for doing the transformations. But if you have a scenario where you have a warehouse and you are thinking about using notebooks or store procs for your transformations, I highly recommend go and explore the warehouse store procs. They don't use a lot of resources. I don't know why people complain, that no, you should use notebooks and Apache Spark for doing the transformations. Hey, look, that's just another, this is just another way of doing transformations. And if you prefer to use the warehouse as part of the architecture, I found this being great. Absolutely, the number of capacity units used by store procs in the warehouse are less than the capacity units used by notebooks. And if that's a good scenario for you, go and explore it. And if you are using notebooks, which is another basically great approach for transformation, not that you have many, make sure that you share sessions across different pipelines when doing transformations, and also go and optimize, definitely optimize and understand the size of the nodes that you have to use. Those are the two things. Another thing I found, don't know why, look, this is last week, created basically subscriptions, dynamic subscriptions. And this takes advantage of Data Activator. Wow, the number of capacity units than just the dynamic subscription used. It was mind-blowing. Look, give you an example. I cannot show you this because it was a customer environment, but essentially just a dynamic subscription for 50 PDF files was a massive spike. Used a lot of resources, something. I'm not saying, maybe I'm not saying avoid them. I'm not saying, look, avoid them if you can. I'm not saying don't use them, but these are things that they have learned by using the platform. Your experience might be different. If you found that this is not the case, let me know down in the chat. But here you have a few things. Okay, let's start summarizing capacity planning. So you've done, at this stage in your proof of concept, you've been running different pipelines and transformations. We want to focus on that. I wouldn't bother on doing performance testing in the reporting layer. You can go and simulate having 20, 50 users querying the reports. It's not so much of a deal because that makes only a small percentage of the number of capacity units that you're going to be taking advantage of. But there you have it. So focus on the background operations, data movements and transformations for capacity planning. At this stage, you should have 14 days of data to understand what the bandwidth velocity of copying the data and transforming the data. And either if you are bringing information from Oracle and from SQL Server and from a DB2 database, after going through this process of isolating different pipelines, you should also know actually what the throughput of each one of those tables coming from different systems and how many capacity units that you are using for each one of those tables. And the last hint in this area, I guess, is remember the capacity units that you're going to use, for example, in a pipeline. If you're importing 100 rows or you're importing 10,000 rows, the capacity units might be quite similar because this is built for working with large volumes of data as well. But especially when transforming the data, okay? Let me give you a more specific scenario. So if you go and spin up an Apache Spark cluster that essentially runs, with 4 nodes and 32 gigabytes of memory, and you're trying to just push 100 rows into the civil layer because you're doing a comparison for a dimension table. So doing 100 rows or doing 10,000 rows is going to use the same number of capacity units because you are wasting a lot of resources just by using the Apache Spark with 4 nodes and 32 gigabytes of memory to move 1,000 or 10,000 rows, which is massive, right? But then you can think about, okay, what if we share that session of Apache Spark across all the dimensions? Okay, I don't want to spin up one Apache Spark cluster per transformation. I want to spin up one Apache Spark cluster and use that one for all my transformations. So that's the level of optimization that you want to get to when doing capacity planning and preparing for it. And now let's move on to our second area of today, which is actually cost optimization. Let me let's see. Okay, let's go again quickly. Okay, so remember you have the pay-as-you-go model and the reservation model. So if you stick to pay-as-you-go, so you don't get the 41% saving. And I'll show you the flexibility that I was talking about. Okay, if you go pay-as-you-go, think about this. You have a capacity for data movements. This is what happens with lives, Then we're going to trim that part of the video after. So you have a capacity for data movements. Remember, this will be allocated to the workspace for data movement. And here you'll do all the orchestration, moving the data and transforming the data. And you might have a capacity for your data stores, I was saying, and a capacity for your reports. That's it. So with the data movement capacity, you might say like every day at 1 a.m. we start it. We'll do all the transformations. We'll put the data in the data stores. We transform the data. We'll move from bronze to silver to gold if you have that medallion architecture, or so on. And then let's say at 3 a.m. we post it. 2 hours of moving the data and transforming the data. And you might say that you allocate this F8. This is what was mentioned. You allocate an F8 for this, but then you're only paying 2 hours of transformations a day. And with the data stores, you might decide to have the data stores running an F2 and the reports running an F2 as well, different capacities, so they don't overlap the resources. You can allocate as well the same capacity to those 2 data stores, but the idea that if your reports are using, your semantic models are using Direct Lake, so they have to have access to the data stores. They have to be available. Now, if your reports are using import mode, you might decide as well that this data stores capacity, you might post it as well if nobody is using it. And you only have this capacity for the reports that they have to be running import mode, fair enough, available 24/7 with a lower tier after you have refreshed all those semantic models. This is good flexibility that you get with pay-as-you-go. Now, on top of that, development workloads, if you have a development team doing transformations 24/7, okay, you might go to reservation, but you have a similar scenario like this, okay? And what else? You can also, within the same region, and this is another trend, within the same region, you can go and provision capacities and delete them, and allocate workspaces to existing capacities. So there is a lot of engineering that you can do in the backend when allocating all these fabric capacities. So something to think about. I know how it is, when we are thinking about fabric capacities, like no, let's go and get an F64, and we run that 24/7. Okay, look, you might be missing out on some savings when using pay-as-you-go. Now, let's talk about reservations now. This is mind-blowing, okay? When you get the reservation, you are committing to use a specific number of capacity units per second within a month. So you're basically saying, okay, give me an F2 for the whole month, and then you'll be able to use that for your workloads. And if you don't use them, you still pay, let's say, $156 a month. But the good thing about reservations is that you can actually apply them at different scope. So when you're spinning up a reservation, so you'll be able to apply that reservation across the Azure management groups and across different subscriptions, and it could be shared. What this means essentially, when you get a reservation, is that you could have here your development fabric capacities, and you could have the production fabric capacities, and your reservation will sit here at the top, right? You might have a reservation here, an F2, and you will use this reservation across all your workloads. And whatever comes on top of it, that will be a pay-as-you-go model. So I think this is where the real savings are, basically. So you get a reservation, and you want to apply those reservations across multiple subscriptions and multiple management groups. And that way, whatever comes on top of this F2, you will pay that as essentially a pay-as-you-go model. I don't see why. I'm sure there are scenarios, okay, where you want to apply this reservation maybe only to production workloads, But in most scenarios, I think you might just start getting a different F2 reservation. You can have multiple reservations and share those reservations across different workloads. A reservation doesn't have to necessarily apply to only one Microsoft Fabric capacity. And I'll show you when you're spinning up a reservation, and I'll come here. You're in the Azure portal. When you go to reservations, and let me try moving search here for Fabric. You can see here at the top already the scope where you want to apply that reservation, right? And you can apply shared means across all the Fabric capacities within your tenant, but then you can select a specific management group, a single subscription, or single resource group. Okay. Here you can see when I'm getting the reservation, definitely make sure you change this to be the correct region. So in my case, it will be Australia East. And I will select that essentially on a monthly basis. So it's an annual commitment, but on a monthly basis. So I pay on a monthly basis. Upfront will be good in the case, the scenario that you're getting to the end of the financial year and you have to use some budget and spare money that you have in your budget, and you say, okay, let's put this money across a reserve capacity for the next year. I think that'll be a good scenario. Otherwise, if you are starting the financial year, I would recommend just go with the monthly basis. And when I add this to the cart, the scope will apply, okay, from the get-go. So you can see any eligible subscriptions that they have a Fabric capacity, they will take available of that reservation. So we're getting that 40% discount. And then when I close this and go to my cart, here I can say how many capacity units I want. And this relates exactly to this pricing over here. So let me scroll up. So basically what we're getting is you can get a reservation for one capacity unit, right? Which is great, but essentially you want to get as many as you need on a monthly basis to try to cover 100% of your workloads. So I mean that you might still be doing the same, starting the Fabric capacity, running your orchestration, moving the data, transforming the data, and then you decide to post the Fabric capacity. And then you might have another Fabric capacity hosting the reports and the data stores. And the reason for still keep doing the same that I was suggesting in the pay-as-you-go model is because you are applying the reservation across all the capacity units that you are using across all your tenant. That's where the real savings are. So they are on applying reservations across all the Microsoft Fabric capacities and still playing around with the starting and posting and scaling up and down those Fabric capacities. In here, definitely, you'll never get one, but you can go and get one, but you'll try to get like a 2, 3, or 4. Or my recommendation here, get multiple reservations of 1 or 2. Because then you can cancel reservations and start new ones. But if you allocate all the quantities to one, it'll be difficult for you'll be canceling all of them. So get multiple ones, you can do it incrementally. Start with 2 and then monitor it. And after 1 or 2 months, you get another 2, you have visibility of that. Reservations, they will look like this in the portal. You can see here I provisioned accidentally one in East US and I had to cancel it. But then I have this one. When I go in, I don't believe this works, but in the future might work. Actually, no, this works. You can see as well exactly that in this case of this capacity, we have a lot of unused capacity units that we're not taking advantage of. And the reason for this is because for this specific subscription, I just changed from using this capacity to use a trial for doing some more testing as such. This is really, really useful to understand if you are using all your reservation capacity units. What else? I didn't mention it before, but remember you can get a trial capacity for doing all the performance testing, an F-64 for 60 days. They usually offer you a renewal. If that trial expires, you can get a different colleague to get another trial capacity for 60 days and renewal. So you can be running trial for quite a long time for doing all the performance testing. And finally, from cost management point of view, when you're applying that reservation, you can see here, if I expand fabric capacity, you will see that reserve capacity in here. So those two capacity units, and whatever comes up on top should be pay as you go. And then you see as well all the other meters in here related to One Lake that won't be considered as part of that reservation. So a lot of food for thought here, things that you want to monitor. But hopefully you found this session useful from a capacity planning point of view. All right, that's funny, right? Okay, cool. To summarize a little bit the session today, from a capacity planning point of view, you have those two tools available out there. The one in the website, there's a workbook going around. The two of them are they're going to give you some information for a ballpark figure. They are not mature enough. They're missing a lot of different features, capabilities, input parameters. So we don't have that level of detail. But once that you start the proof of concept, go and install the Fabric Capacity Metrics app. Go and start running those data movements and transformation from the get-go. Try creating different workspaces, different items names that are going to allow you easily test the performance as well as to validate that ballpark figure for using the platform. And once that you move out from the proof of concept and you go MVP, you know that you want to continue doing that performance testing and essentially make sure that everything has been validated as part of that trial. You can do everything as part of the trial without going and getting an F2, F4, F8. So right now it's great. You get the trial, an F64, and you can start doing all that performance testing to validate the ongoing cost of your platform. And finally, from a cost saving point of view, you saw the two different pricing models, pay as you go and reservation. But essentially, look, the best way to do it is one that you stop using the days and days of Fabric trials. You can go and get a reservation, apply that across different Fabric capacities. It's using the scope shared or management group or subscriptions, and monitor that. Start by getting one reservation with 2 units or 2 reservations with 2 units each. So that gives you the flexibility of canceling some of them in the future. And on top of that, keep using good practices. Keep thinking about, okay, if you are not using a Fabric capacity during a specific period of time for transformation, go and pause it, scale it down or scale it up. Start, pause, start playing with the REST APIs from the Azure portal for doing all the things. You can provision capacities for specific workspaces, then move those workspaces within other Fabric capacities. A lot of room for decreasing that ongoing cost of the platform. I haven't seen still like a lot of companies doing that. I don't believe we're at that level of maturity, but we were doing that in Azure. There is no any reason why you shouldn't be doing that as part of the Microsoft Fabric capacities. We had a couple of problems, with the live stream, but if you have any comments, put them down below, and don't forget to subscribe, and see you next week.